Gentlemen, please take your seats. It seems like we had an amazing turnout today, and we may need to bring in additional chairs. So we'd just like to see if everybody in the house has a seat and identify those who do not have a seat. So it's important that you grab your seat right now, please. Okay. I think we do need a couple more seats, sir. They're bringing them. All right. Okay, great. So we've got additional seats coming up. Apologies to our guests who don't have seats. We are humbled to have such an awesome turnout. So your seats will be coming through shortly. Good morning, everybody. Sanibonani, Dumelang, Lochani. If we've got any Ndebeles here, Avsheni, Dimacheroni, Goeiemorgen. Guten Morgen. I take this opportunity to greet you in as many languages as I can, not only to take advantage of our Heritage Month, as we'll be celebrating Heritage Day this coming Saturday on the 24th of September, but also because I'm an individual who loves to look for opportunities to be grateful and show gratitude. And this morning, I'm grateful to be alive in a country that is full of diversity, because in diversity, there is learning, there is growth, there is learning, there is knowledge, and that all results in growth. I greet you, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Abigail Kuluse, and I have the pleasure of being your program director for this session. I wish to acknowledge in our midst all the distinguished guests, His Excellency Ambassador Brule, His Excellency Deputy Ambassador Enrico Brandt, and in absentia, the DDG of DHEAD, Mr. Sam Zungu. I believe he may be joining us a bit later. The CEO of NBI, thank you, and all the key partners and stakeholders that are here today, a very big welcome to you. We do not take this for granted. We know there are so many other things that you could have been attending to this morning, but you chose to join us and honor our invitation. So we thank you very much. Just to take you through how we will go, the flow of our event today, we will start off with the opening remarks, and we'll hear more about what the program is about, and then go into a panel discussion, and we will have a light lunch a bit later. From a housekeeping perspective, the bathrooms are right at the back of the room, up the stairs. They are unisex bathrooms, so we all will be using the same main door, but you'll see when you get inside, the different doors are marked. The smoking areas right behind me through the main balcony, and there is another balcony through those doors at the back. The emergency exit, ladies and gentlemen, in case something happens, but we hope nothing will happen. We just need to make sure that everybody knows what they need to do. So there are 3 emergency exits to this venue. Behind me on the main balcony, there are stairs going downstairs. By the main entrance, there are also stairs just in front of the lifts. There's an emergency exit with stairs. And also at the back, through that door, there are emergency exits to lead you out. The Department of Higher Education and Training, DHEAD, in partnership with GIZ, on behalf of the German Federation Ministry of Economic Cooperation and Development, which is BMZ, and the State Secretariat of Economic Affairs, SECO, with support from the National Business Initiative, are launching the Career Path Development for Employment, CPDE program. The just transition in the South African context poses a myriad of complex challenges owing to structural issues and barriers that need to be addressed. The infrastructure rollout across key sectors required to release a just transition is unprecedented and will result in the need for skills and services along the value chain as a result of as well as resultant economic and employment opportunities to meet this demand. The skills and services needed will range from specialist and technical expertise to general and auxiliary activities to complement and support the overall value chain. A truly just transition to net zero by 2050 requires a deep and comprehensive understanding of the industry needs and the supporting skills. The CPD4E program provides innovative solutions for inclusive employment creation in the transition process by addressing both the demand and the supply and the interaction therein to capitalize on the emerging opportunities of enterprise development, skills development, and employment creation. So this launch aims to unpack how, working together, we can achieve a vision of an equitable and inclusive economy by creating and enabling a demand-led environment for skills and employment creation within the framework of just transition. A well-coordinated and partnership-driven approach can support the successful implementation of these objectives, ensuring social and economic challenges of inequality, poverty, and unemployment are addressed. Ladies and gentlemen, the key outcome of today's event is to launch the CPD4E program, detailing both its importance and the potential impact within the context of just transition. We aim through this event to also provide private sector members and our key stakeholders an opportunity to engage on the key challenges that this program is seeking to address, and also to identify the areas of collaboration. As they say, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. On that note, I would like to welcome on stage, to give our opening remarks, Arusha Singh, the Chief Director of Programs and Qualifications at the Department of Higher Education and Training, DHET. Arusha, please can you come up?
Can you hear me? Is it audible? Thank you very much to the program director, and apologies from our Deputy Director General, who should have been here had he not have had another commitment. So he tenders his sincerest apologies. So I am here on his behalf. His Excellency Nicholas Bruhl, the Ambassador of Switzerland, His Excellency Enrico Brandt, the Deputy Ambassador of Germany, the entire GIZ delegation, the SECO delegation, all other government officials present here from various relevant departments and institutions, and distinguished representatives of business, civil society, media, and academia of South Africa. A very good morning to you. It is an honor for me to be here and represent the DHET in today's launch of the South African-German-Swiss cooperation on the Career Path Development for Employment Program, which we commonly refer to as the CPD4E. The CPD4E program aims to improve the employment and income opportunities for young people in South Africa in a sustainable and increasingly decarbonized economy. Apart from their positive environmental impact, this transition presents an opportunity for economic growth and, critically, for job creation. The project will address two central challenges in South Africa. The first of employment, and the second, a just energy transition. Massive unemployment, especially among youth, is a stubborn scourge in our society, one that we grapple with continuously. And as we know, youth unemployment is the highest priority in government currently. We appreciate the continuous support of the German Development Cooperation in its efforts to support the improvement of the vocational education and training system in South Africa and to tackle the high youth unemployment levels. Clearly, there is a need to bring young people faster into employment through programs aligned with the needs of the modern labor market. To achieve this, the existing TVET institutions will have to become more demand-led, which has actually already begun, for example, through the establishment of our centers of specialization in 21 colleges. However, identifying workplace opportunities for the youth to gain practical experience and facilitating access to this practical part of their education and training remains a major challenge. Building on the experiences of the Skills Development for a Green Economy project, the new CPD4E program will explore new innovative models together with the private sector, for example, to foster entrepreneurship among TVET graduates. Together with the NBI, hubs will be set up in TVET colleges to train and employ young people, especially in township economies, as well as supporting small and medium township businesses and enterprises to access new markets and new supply chains, and in doing so, improve the management of their businesses. This will enable them to grow and then employ new graduates. The new CPD4E program will shift, as has historically been the case, with the preoccupation and focus on simply improving the quality of TVET, which we will continue to do as a department, but will also focus on employment promotion by widening the interventions to support the private sector and towards the transition from education to work. With regard to the Just Energy Transition Partnership, the support to the TVET sector will facilitate this transition in the labor market. Coupled with the unemployment crisis, South Africa is facing a second major challenge. The transition from what has been mainly a coal-based energy system to a carbon-neutral economy. And apart from the economic considerations of this transition, I think it's not lost on any one of us the challenge of the energy crisis in this country right now as we stand here. So need I say more on this issue? This massive economic and technical restructuring process will have significant implications for employment and the skills required in the labor market going forward into a new era. The South African TVET system needs to respond to this challenge and opportunity as well. The CPD4E program will therefore take a sectoral approach based on the challenges and potential of the transition towards a low-carbon economy and address the resulting challenges in respect of employment promotion and technical and vocational education and training. There are already substantive levels of cooperation among government, civil society, and business partners in the implementation and steering of the CPD4E program. And much of this is built on the results and lessons learned in previous interventions supported by the German government and GIZ. Pilot activities have been tested with the support of SECO. I am pleased that the CPD4E program will also be supported by Switzerland, and this contribution is applauded and is certainly bound to be invaluable in this project. In closing, I would like to thank the Federal Ministry for Economic Cooperation and Development, BMZ, and the Swiss State Secretariat for Economic Affairs, SECO, for funding the new CPD4E program. I would like to thank GIZ for the implementation and the partnership that is hugely appreciated and of immense significance to the TVET sector. And with that, I thank you very much.
Thank you, Aruna, and my apologies for not pronouncing your name correctly earlier, Aruna and not Arusha. Thank you. I wish to just make two announcements before we proceed. To resolve our seating issue, I would like to ask our panelists to please join me on stage so we can make the seat available to some of the guests. I'm told there are some guests who still don't have seats. So you have an early invitation. My apologies to unsettle you. It's just an early invitation. Please feel free to bring your coffee up. Mr. Mpini, please feel free. And while you do that, I've also been asked to just remind you that if you have not received your name tag, you need to have signed in at the door, so just in front of the lifts, you need to have just registered there and received your name tag. So if you haven't done that, please can you also do that? Thank you very much. Thank you, thank you. Okay, great. Ladies and gentlemen, I would now like to call up on stage for our address by the Swiss Ambassador, His Excellency, Dr. Ambassador Nicholas Brohl. Please come up, sir.
Dear Chief Director Aruna Singh, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. The stage is full. I'm honored now, so we are 4 on stage now. That's easier. I'm honored to be here today on behalf of the Swiss State Secretariat for Economic Affairs, SECO. Today, we are launching the Career Path Development for Employment program, the so-called CPD4E. The program aims to improve the employment prospects of young people in South Africa in an economy that is challenged by climate change. It is a partnership between the Department of Higher Education and Training, Switzerland, and Germany. We will focus on bringing together the private and public sector to create opportunities in the context of climate change and the need for a just transition. We built on the experiences made in the previous program, where we focused specifically on skills for a green economy. A key lesson learned is that we need a strong and trustworthy collaboration between the public and private sector to improve the quality of vocational education. It is imperative that private sector gives input into the curriculum development. Only then we will get an alignment between the qualifications the young people get through the TVET system and the needs of industry. Furthermore, ladies and gentlemen, we have learned that short dual qualification courses are a pragmatic instrument to get young people a job. Our collaboration with the National Business Initiative has shown first results in townships. They work together with TVET colleagues, local small and medium enterprises, well-established companies, and the government to train young people when it comes to installation, repair, and maintenance jobs. I would like to highlight one very successful collaboration with the Gauteng Department of Health, where small enterprises could access the value chains at the Chris Hani Baragwanath Hospital by repairing and maintaining hospital equipment, thus demonstrating the importance of public-private partnerships are key. I would like to point out another success story from our previous work. The South African paper processing industry, SAPI, has partnered with our installation, repair and maintenance hub and the Umfolozi TVET in Ilembe. SAPI supported 6 of their suppliers to participate in our enterprise development program. Forward-looking, I'm delighted that this hub in Ilembe will be expanded and more hubs will be built around the country. This is possible through the partnership with the German development bank KfW. We call upon private companies to make use of the hubs and work with them and local TVET colleges to develop the local suppliers and their employees. The program, ladies and gentlemen, is mindful of climate change and the just transition. We envisage that an improved support for the small enterprises in sectors relevant to just transition and green economy stabilizes their economic situation, strengthens their competitiveness, and opens growth prospects. This will generate new jobs and increase the need for personnel. We all know that small and medium enterprises are a driving force behind job creation. There are many similarities and huge synergy potential between Switzerland and South Africa regarding small and medium enterprises, by the way. Also, Switzerland is known abroad for some of its big companies. 99% of our economies, but are small or medium companies. They are the backbone of our economy and the driving force. Also, when it comes to vocational training and job creation. South Africans have an incredible entrepreneurial spirit waiting to be unleashed. There is, especially amongst the younger people, a strong wish towards independence in the sense of self-employment and having one's own business. I hope our collaboration will contribute to a better future exactly for them. Once again, ladies and gentlemen, we are honored to partner with the Department of Higher Education on this journey so that more young South Africans can find a job, start or grow their own business. Let's partner together. Only together we will make a difference. Thank you so much.
Indeed, only together we will make a difference. Thank you, Ambassador. I'd like to call on stage His Excellency Deputy Ambassador Hendrico Brandt to give us his address.
Ms. Colucci, Chief Director Singh, Ambassador Brühl, all other government officials present here from various relevant departments and institutions, distinguished representatives of business, civil society, media, and academia here in South Africa. It's a great honor to represent at this important launch Germany of the South African German-Swiss cooperation on the Career Path Development for Employment program. This launch, this program, comes at the right time. South Africa is in a difficult economic situation. The effects of the pandemic have further aggravated the situation on the job market. It has caused, as we all know, the loss of many jobs, with particularly dire effects on young people, leaving almost every second youth unemployed, and a staggering 2 out of 3 unemployed amongst the 15 to 24 years old. Germany is very aware of the socio-economic challenges in this country, and German development cooperation activities are continuously supporting the South African government in its important efforts to tackle the high youth unemployment levels. Germany reconfirmed its commitment to support the improvement of the vocational education and training system in South Africa, of which this program is a central intervention. It has become evident that there is a need to bring young people faster into employment by more agile training programs aligned with the needs of the modern labor market, especially regarding skills required for a just transition. In order to achieve this, the existing institutions of technical and vocational education and training will have to become more demand-led. Another challenge is identifying workplace opportunities for youth to gain practical experiences and facilitating access to this practical part of their education and training path. Therefore, CPD4E will explore new and innovative models along with the private sector, for instance, aiming at fostering entrepreneurship among the graduates. Hubs, as we have heard, will be set up in colleges to train and employ young people. You know, when I talk to German enterprises in South Africa, they tell me that from a business point of view, the situation is not as bad as the general mood, but they do need skilled workers. So maybe one day some of the participants in the program will work with a good salary in one of the German companies. And it has also been said that the other major challenge is this transition from what has been mainly a coal-based energy system to a carbon-neutral economy. This transition is a complex, it's a huge project. It entails massive economic and technological and social reconstructing process. And it, of course, will also have significant implications for employment and the skills required in the labor markets. The South African government and we, as international partners, are committed to making the transition fair and just. That means paying attention to the concerns of especially vulnerable groups. It is the goal of German development cooperation to support South Africa's transition to an environmentally sustainable, low-carbon, climate-resilient and inclusive economy. The so-called Just Energy Transition Partnership between South Africa, Germany, France, the EU, Great Britain and the United States is a milestone of international cooperation in renewable energies and climate protection. The partnership aims to kickstart a speedy transition that will help to build a South Africa that is competitive in the global low-carbon economy, as well as contributing to tackling climate change. In this framework, the program we are launching together today addresses the significant future skills needs in the labor market. It takes many, many skilled workers for a just energy transition from a largely coal-based energy supply to an increasingly decarbonized economy. We will, of course, pay special attention to promote the employability of vulnerable groups like girls and women. Therefore, the program will take a sectoral approach based on the challenges and potential of the transition towards a low-carbon economy. It will address the resulting challenges in respect of employment promotion and technical and vocational training. And I got the wrong page. Education training, yes. CPD4E will work towards supporting dialogue between the state, private sector and civil society using the just transition process to promote the competitiveness of companies, especially micro, small and medium-sized enterprises, and gearing skills development toward the transition. For all this, we did not start from zero. There already are strong levels of cooperation amongst government, civil society and business partners on the implementation and steering of the CPD4E program. We build on lessons learned and on successful experiences made in previous intervention with the National Business Initiative, for example. With the support of SICO, pilot approaches have been tested with important results to build on. It is also the result of the cooperation that has been formed under the able leadership of the Department of Higher Education and Training. I am very pleased that our partnership with South Africa now extends to our Swiss neighbors and friends on the implementation of the CPD4E program. South Africa, Germany and Switzerland already cooperate in other areas, so this partnership is truly also a multi-stakeholder partnership and growing. Therefore, thank you to all participating institutions and persons, and I wish this program to become a great success. Thank you very much.
Thank you, His Excellency. I really like what you said about, you know, the German companies absorbing some of the youth and creating employment. It is certainly what we'd love to achieve with this program, is that through providing relevant skills for the young people, relevant and skills for the future, that they're able to transition into employment, both in the SME sector and in our corporate sector. Ladies and gentlemen, we are about to have load shedding, the beauty of our season. So, it should have gone off at 12. We will have a small technical glitch for about 2 minutes or so when load shedding happens. So in case there's a delay, I think maybe what I will do, I would like to continue and call up our next speakers, but I'll ask for an apology to please bear in mind or note that should everything go silent and dark, we will need to pause for a few seconds while they get us back up again through the generator. Would that be okay? Great, thank you. So to hear more about the program, I'd like to call up the project director for the CPD4E program together with the program manager at SECO to come and tell us more about the career path development for employment program. Kirsten Freeman and Gisela Roth, please do come up.
Good morning, or is it afternoon already? Ladies and gentlemen, let's see how this goes with the load shedding, managing the uncertainty is definitely one of our businesses anyway, so we will cope. I would like to greet His Excellency Nicolas Brühl, Ambassador of Switzerland, and His Excellency Enrico Brandt, Deputy Ambassador of Germany. Many greetings to Aruna Singh, Chief Director, Programs and Qualifications at our partner ministry, the Department of Higher Education and Training. Many greetings and a warm welcome to all government officials present here today, and distinguished representative of businesses, civil society, media and academia of South Africa, dear partners and dear colleagues. We are going to present to you what CPD4E is all about, and we are very excited to introduce to you the program together, because as we heard, it is a joint activity of Germany and Switzerland, so we decided to come up as a team, and I will hand over to Gisela to start.
Yeah, thank you very much. So actually, a lot has already been said, a lot of great things, and I would actually like to elaborate a bit on what the Swiss ambassador has said, and also the pilots that have been mentioned, because I think sometimes it's a bit difficult to grasp what actually the program is doing. So I was choosing one little project example that was done under the previous program, and this was with the hospital, the Chris Hani Baragwanath Academic Hospital. So they're actually, together with the Gauteng provincial government, 3 training workshops were established in the area, in the trades of carpentry, upholstery, and welding. And so 60 young people from Soweto, actually, they were enrolled on the program, and they were given a 3-month skills training followed by a 6-month workplace training. And actually, given the COVID situation, it has been decided also after a performance assessment of the young people enrolled that 33 of them would be given to continue for another 6 months on this workplace training. And at the same time, actually, and this is where the private sector gets in, is that the township business was operating, a township business was actually given the opportunity to operating the hospital facility in setting up the structured production processes. And they then set up an extensive refurbishment and repair of hospital equipment, such as beds, wheelchairs, stand stripes, and stretchers. And in the end, after 6 months, actually, 1,200 equipment have been repaired for the hospital. And actually, this was equipment that was already, or most of that was already taken out of the asset list of the hospital. So I think this also shows very nicely the links you can have to the public sector and how it can benefit also the health system, for instance. And so, I mean, the program is continuing, and actually, it's very nice that the Gauteng City Region Academy, they have been funding the enrollment of 51 additional candidates in June this year. And there are discussions with the Gauteng department to continue the facility and even to include also general repair and plumbing students. So of course, as a development partner, we like those partnerships. We like especially also if the government is coming in, also the local government. And so I think this shows very nicely the partnership that is possible under also the future program. And I think, I mean, the slide is up. I think we have discussed a lot about the problem, right? The huge unemployment needs to be addressed somehow. The just transition is putting really also a big problem, because you need the skills to be able to address that. And the companies, they need also to be able to get those skills, right? So maybe we can switch to the next slide. So basically, we build on the previous program and are expanding the pilots, the one that I just mentioned, but also others. And the idea is really to bring in more strongly also the private sector, because the private sector is actually key. And you need the students to have been equipped with skills that are actually in demand by the private sector, right? Because why would you have otherwise, as a business, the idea to employ someone that doesn't actually fit what you're looking for, right? And the second point actually is that the private sector is a key player in employment promotion, as we all know, I think. I mean, SMEs, they are providing up to 60% of jobs across the world, basically. And so that they are really interested and willing also to join the program. Of course, as a business, you need to know how you can grow, right? So for this, you need also business development support services. And also, actually, you need to have the market to the access, the access to the market, sorry, so that you actually can grow your business. And so basically, this is where I think it has already been said before, the focus is on employment, promotion, creation, and also looking at the sectors for a just transition. And Kirsten is actually now presenting to you the program, how it is set up with the different pillars.
Thank you so much, Gisela. So you heard that actually the program tackles immense challenges. Yeah, we heard that from our ambassadors, we heard that from DHET, and of course these challenges are the starting point, and it can be summarized that the project is very ambitious. I would like to cite a Greek philosopher, Heraclitus, who said, "Big results require big ambitions." And in that spirit, let me introduce to you how the CPD4E program shall be implemented. You might be informed about the basic information, so that has been said already, that the objective of the program is that the employment perspectives of young South Africans in a sustainable and increasingly decarbonized economy in the just transition are improved. So how are we going to get there? I've tried to put the whole program on one slide. I'm not sure if you can read it, but the idea how we want to get to this employment promotion is that we are using the so-called integrated approach to employment promotion. And integrated means that we are not just looking at one part of the picture. It's not only the supply side, it's also the demand side, and it is also what happens in between. So we have to bridge between supply and demand to bring young people into employment. And this is exactly what we are going to do, that we widened the scope of the project compared to what we did before. So we will still support the South African TVET system in its in creating demand-driven TVET and skills development offers, and to improve the delivery capacity. So we are talking about lecture capacity building, in-company mentor training. We want to develop new occupational profiles and curricula. It need more agile training interventions as we already heard also from DHET, and we will support the development of shorter programs and agile training interventions, always in collaboration with the private sector. So looking at the supply side, at the same time we opened the focus towards the support of the private sector to unlock employment potentials that are coming with the transition towards a greener economy. And here we will support entrepreneurship, we will support SMEs, especially in townships, and a great example had just been given by Gisela, how that can look like, and what opportunities also can be found here in South Africa. And we want to continue to support these initiatives. And looking at also how can we connect that, for example, with ecologic industrial parks. And when it comes to the bridging, we will support matching exercises, what we call transition from learning to earning. And here we are putting a particular emphasis on vulnerable groups, including women and girls. All of that needs to be connected to the system level. And here we will work on what we call innovation and learning. So we want to support innovative approaches for employment promotion, for example, performance-based financing approaches for re- and upskilling that are particularly relevant for the just transition. And we want to create a space and a room to discuss what does the just transition actually mean for TVET? What are the imperatives? How do we as a society have to react on these immense challenges that are lying ahead? And it will be the topic for centuries hopefully not, but quite many years that we will be working on together. And we want to give impulses through this project to find a way how to navigate through these quite large challenges. So as I said, it's a very ambitious program, but it's also very exciting. And I'm very much looking forward to working together with Nico, with DHET, and with you, the South African partners, to learn and create, to co-create together how we can support an inclusive employment promotion in the context of a truly just transition. Thank you very much.
A very big thank you to Ms. Kirsten Freeman and Gisela Roth for that detail in how the program will roll out. I have to agree that it is indeed ambitious, but I also do know that to whom more is given, more is required. So we need to step up to the plate and join forces in addressing these two major issues facing our country right now. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like us to move through to our panel discussion. But maybe before I do that, I'd like to perhaps engage you a little bit. And I'd like to find out from you, sir, can you please have our Mentimeter slide up? I would like to hear from you, just based on what you've heard from our speakers this morning. Can you just jot down a few comments or thoughts or questions that you may have based on your reflections for this morning? So how Mentimeter works, if you can please go to www.mentimeter.com, and it will ask you to enter the code. And when you enter that code, you will find a section that allows you to capture your questions and your comments based on what you've heard so far this morning. We will, at a later stage, be reviewing and going back to those questions and have a discussion on those. We are now going to move over to our panel discussion, and I'm going to join the panel, if I may. Thank you, thank you. I'd like to start off by perhaps giving a brief introduction to our panelists. So the topic of our discussion is really for us to explore and have a conversation about what this really means in terms of just exploring the opportunities and perhaps some of the challenges that come with trying to solve for inclusive employment. For inclusive employment creation within the Just Transition framework. So we have on the panel, and I'll start off on the far right. Far right? Yeah, far right. I always get it wrong, by the way. I'm one of those who still clicks my fingers to see which one is right and which one is left. On our far right, we have Ms. Fumani Mtembi, who is the Managing Director of Knowledge Pili. She's a co-founder of the Pili Energy Group and the Managing Director of its subsidiary, Knowledge Pili, which is a 100% black-owned independent energy and development company in South Africa. The group's mission is to contribute to structural transformation by executing on infrastructure and impact investment models to transform rural, township, and peri-urban communities through thriving economies. So we look forward to hearing more about that and some of the lessons that you've certainly had. Next to her, we have Mr. Yimpini Mabunda, and he is the Chief Executive Officer of General Electric South Africa. He comes with immense years of experience as a business leader across major consumer goods, food franchise, telecom businesses across Africa and the United Kingdom. Prior to General Electric, he also filled a number of roles in various multinational companies. And so his expertise in strategy, marketing, sales, digital transformation, data analysts, business turnaround, private equity, stakeholder engagement, ESG, business development define him as a well-rounded leader. And I'm so looking forward to hear about some of your insights in terms of how do we actually get business more involved and what are some of the things that we should be thinking of as business. Mr. Yimpini also sits on a number of executive boards, of which he sits as a non-executive director and also a chairman. And lastly, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to introduce to you Mr. Deepak Patel. Mr. Deepak Patel heads up the climate finance and innovation within the South African Presidential Commission. As you may know, the PPC, which is the Presidential Climate Commission, was established and is chaired by the South African President, President Cyril Ramaphosa. He joined the South African Presidential Climate Commission in 2021, and he leads the team to work on areas of climate finance mapping and financing a just transition and developing a strategy for financing the pathway to a net zero emission target for 2025. Prior to joining the PPC, Mr. Deepak was also a special advisor to the Minister of Public Enterprises, focusing a lot on developing strategies and financial programs and state-owned enterprises, financial programs for management and governance in state-owned enterprises. Mr. Deepak, we're looking forward to hearing more about government strategic views on how we actually move to a just transition while creating opportunities for employment. I'd like to give a 5-minute session or give you 5 minutes to each do your opening remarks, and thereafter we can then go into a discussion and questions and answers. Please do go ahead, Ms. Fumani.
Sure. Thank you very much for the honor of being here today. I have to confess, when one of my other roles is as a board member at the National Business Initiative, and when I was invited to this, I thought it was a much humbler event. So had I known what I was in for, I might have done my hair or something, Gillian. But we're here now, and I'm very honored to be here, and honored to have everyone's audience. I think also just a correction. My name is simply Fumani Mtembi. I don't have 2 last names.
Oh.
Just a minor but very important point. I think the first thing that I wanted to reflect on, particularly because sometimes the conversation around the just transition is so politicized, is that, when I think of South Africa and the foundation of the South Africa that I am so proud of, I think of a country that is philosophically one that I would call pragmatically progressive.
That to me is what South Africa stands for. If you think of our democratic transition, the ability to have, on the one hand, a government of national unity, and on the other, produce from that moment the most progressive constitution in the world, I think we demonstrate an ability to live with the discomfort of the past, without discarding everything from the past, and also being really ambitious about the future that we want, and the future that we want to build for our country. And so for me, the conversation about the just transition, and of course, skills and all of that fall into it, is about carving our future, and being bold about that, but also appreciating that we have a present moment, and we don't need to shy away from it. I think recent events have demonstrated to us, in a sense, some of the hypocrisy that exists in the global community around, transitioning, particularly on the energy front. And, you see when countries are threatened geopolitically, how, coal comes back into the equation. And I think what it speaks to is the importance of understanding your own local context and doing what is best for your context. Now, I say this as a renewable energy entrepreneur because I'm not dogmatic about it as a technology class. And I think we need to, in thinking about the just transition, not be intimidated by the fact that we have jobs that need to be preserved, in sectors that may not be popular but have a key role to play in our future. There are certain technology classes, absolutely, I'm very excited about solar and wind being, popular today. When we started our business, we were seen as naive. We were advised by state enterprises to go into mining, because people couldn't see the future. But my excitement about renewable energy, I don't think negates the importance of other sectors and what they still contribute to, securing the livelihoods of families and households across our country. So that's the first thing that I want to talk about, the importance of being both pragmatic, and then allowing particularly the youth to charge forth into a very progressive kind of future. And as an entrepreneur, one of the things that I think colors my experience is, one, the importance of policy certainty. Entities, developmental financial institutions, to give us 10 million just to run our actual business, right? Because that's how you create value. It's not by being a passive sort of passenger in projects that are owned and controlled by other parties, but it's actually, in creating your own capabilities within an enterprise. Raising that 10 million or even 5 million is much harder to do, because it's very difficult for our enterprise, or let me say our financiers, and this is the entire spectrum, from the commercial financiers to the development financiers. It's very difficult for them to understand and value and support that kind of new economic value creation. And that is the biggest challenge and hurdle to growing our economy, to moving away from this oligopoly structure and creating not just SMMEs, but new enterprises that are going to vie for pole position, not just in the South African economy, but in the global economy. And I think that is the crux of our challenge. Creating skills for the future, absolutely, but those skills need a home, and that home is going to be an entrepreneurship, or rather an enterprises that have been created to house their skills. So in our 13 years, today, I'm grateful. I'm very grateful that we've been able to create 50 jobs, at head office here in Johannesburg, another 40 at our various sites, but we could be much further along if there was policy certainty. And if we all appreciate the importance and the urgency of getting not only out of this current recession, but getting back to where we're supposed to be, then we need to be thinking very aggressively about how we support new enterprises to compete, not just locally, but globally. And I think that's one of the things that I really want to emphasize in our conversation today. All these skills that we're creating, where are they going? They need to go somewhere. And that somewhere, I think, is the thing that we're not so good at, and certainly have lots of ideas around how to do that better.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Fumani. Mr. Impini, would you like to go ahead, please? Give us your opening address.
Yeah, indeed. Thank you so much, Abigail. And good afternoon to everybody. Firstly, let me applaud the Swiss and the German government for this much needed initiative. And of course, my colleagues at NBI, Johan, it's great to see the thinking in the work that we are supporting in the just transition going into execution mode. I'm part of the CEO champions for the NBI, and we, over the last few years, been working very hard on the Just Energy Transition Plan, which of course the Climate Commission is also working through. So it's really great because talking is easy, thinking is easy, but where rubber hits the road is execution. And I think for me, this is really, really key. I think it's common knowledge now that we need to build new capacity, mostly renewables, of between 5 to 7 gigawatts per year for the next 7 to 10 years because of end of life of ESCOM stations, but also the new capacity that's required due to decarbonization. And for perspective, the 5 to 7 gigawatts which we need to build per year is equivalent to what we've built in the last 10 years. So what we built in 10 years, we need to build per year for the next 7 years. That is how much capacity that we need. So of course, with that, it's very clear that we would need new skills. We would need different kind of skills because we're not investing in the renewables at that scale. And of course, that skill is sitting with young people. Hence, this initiative is very important. The role of big business cannot be overemphasized in the sense that, as presented, we are the off-takers. We are the market access. We are the people who drive demand. And therefore, we need to work in that ecosystem to make sure that we have the right skill, but also to make sure that we deploy that skill in our businesses. And there's many success stories that, of course, we can do better, but there's many success stories that we can leverage. And I'll share a couple of examples on how we could work together in the ecosystem to improve that. So when we got into COVID, there was, of course, a huge demand of ventilators, which we make as GE. But no one in the world had capacity to supply the kind of ventilators that we needed. Because if I give you a perspective, we supplied at one time in 3 months more ventilators than we had supplied in 5 years. Okay, and where do you build that capacity? And that's where we actually partnered, because there was no skill to even make that, and we're importing these ventilators. And we partnered with Denel, and we repurposed some of their sites and the skill, which they were not using much because we were all grounded, to actually train them as GE and then put together our resources and started making ventilators through Denel. And that was very successful. Similarly, we did the same with vets on PPE, because no one could get PPE during the pandemic. And we trained third and final year students, engineering students, and partnered with the engineering department at vets and actually leveraged their skill, which typically you'll say they are not yet ready because they haven't even finished their studies, but actually we leveraged them to manufacture PPE locally at vets. That's possible. We have had a lot of experience. Some of you will know that we were involved in a locomotive project, which supplied the locomotives to Transnet, and that was a 54 billion rand project. And we set up a locomotive manufacturing facility in Springs and trained a lot of young people. And that is an example of creating that demand and then leaving lasting skill in the economy. More recently, as GE, because we can anticipate the shortage of engineers, we invested nearly $3 million to launch the Next Engineers program. And that Next Engineers program is particularly working with the Gauteng government, particularly targeting girls as well as township skill, because that's where the majority of the youth who are not employed are sitting. But it's also a shame, if you ask me, the fact that in South Africa today we've got 110,000 registered engineers, and only 10% of those are women. It's got to change, so we've taken an active step to say this has to happen. Now, it also benefits us from a localization point of view, because the reality of skill shortage in the engineering side, particularly in renewables, is not just in South Africa, it's global. So we cannot sustain ourselves because we can't even rely on importing that skill. Many of our businesses today are even turning down opportunities in markets like South Africa because they cannot find skill to execute projects, and they are choosing and picking. So it can make and give us a competitive advantage if we already have the skill, because I said, well, if I have to execute this project in South Africa, then I also have to send so many engineers, and I just don't have them. So project management, engineering, and so on and so forth. And it's important that we really revive manufacturing for us here, because we are losing on the opportunity. The opportunity also, because the renewable demand is not just for South Africa, it will be across the continent. And the Africa Continental Free Trade Zone gives us that opportunity to actually have manufacturing hubs. And the last point I will make on this is that we shouldn't just look at new build. New build, of course, because it's large infrastructure projects, stimulate the economy, creates the jobs. But what will sustain them is the repairs and maintenance. So the beauty about new build is that once you've built it, you've got repair and maintenance contracts for 20 years. And it's not sustainable for us to keep on importing that skill, which currently we do. We don't have enough field engineers. And this initiative is very much welcome. We will support it to the extent that we can. We are here to partner, and we want to make it happen because it's sustainable, and it helps us lower the cost of doing business. And it really helps us solve some of the societal issues that we have in South Africa, which with unemployment being as high as it is, we are going to have challenges if we do not solve it. And lastly, for me it's personal, because I grew up in Mpumalanga. I am from Mpumalanga, and I'm cognizant that as we transition from coal into other renewable sources, there's already over 400,000 jobs in Mpumalanga that are in the coal ecosystem. We need to think about what is going to happen. So as much as we are training new skills and looking at people who are unemployed, we also need to think about the job, the skill, the people that need to be repurposed. It's actually an easier way to start because they already have the skill. But how do you actually repurpose them for the skills of the future? And there's about 400,000 of them over time that will become vulnerable in Mpumalanga that we need to also think of. So congratulations. This is a great initiative, and I look forward to the conversation on how we actually make it even better.
Thank you, Mr. Mpini. Mr. Deepak, please can you share your opening remarks?
Thank you very much, Abigail. And congratulations to the German and Swiss governments, as well as NPI, for not only hosting this event, but I think embarking on this very ambitious, as you said, journey. But we all know that the longest of journeys and the most fruitful of journeys start with the first few steps. And so in South Africa, I would dare say that there is not a shortage of policy, strategy, and in fact, I would go so far as to say that there isn't a shortage of capacity either. That what there is an inability, it seems, to bring all of these system elements together in a way where even in a resource-constrained environment, we can do the best that we can, which is much more than we seem to be able to do today. In the Just Transition Framework, which colleagues is now adopted by Cabinet as the overarching policy framework as it relates to our climate response and our decarbonization journey. And for South Africa, it was very, very important to ensure that this wasn't only about decarbonization and reducing emissions of other greenhouse gases, but in fact was fundamentally tailored to take its place in a socio-economic development context for South Africa to respond to both the risks and the opportunities that arise from the world's desire to have a lower carbon and therefore lower degree of global warming. From the just transition framework, we talk about various types of justices, and I think I want to stress that we start with distributive justice, which is about ensuring that both the risks and the benefits are shared amongst all of societal players as we move forward. This is absolutely imperative if we are to ensure that as we meet our decarbonization objectives, we also create the opportunities for ameliorating negative impacts, and I'll come back to that, for workers and communities who are impacted as a result of decarbonization, but importantly to provide the opportunities that come, the new opportunities that come with the pathways that we choose to forge in our industrial transformative journey going forward. Now, these are really big words, and in the PCC we are quite aware of the constraints that in fact prevent us perhaps from reaching these objectives optimally. Clearly, the first constraint is finance, and my function in the PCC, together with other players in the ecosystem, is to find a way of financing the just transition in a way that meets all of the outcomes, both commercial as well as potentially the less commercial programs, which I must say would perhaps also include the attention we pay to skills development. And I want to talk about that in a second. We all know that Mpumalanga is going to be greatly affected. Already Mpumalanga has a higher unemployment rate than the rest of the country on average. And I think, as someone pointed out, I think it was the Honorable Deputy Ambassador from Germany pointed out, that youth unemployment in Mpumalanga is in fact closer to 65%. And we all know that in Mpumalanga, with its reliance, 400,000 jobs in the broader ecosystem, is going to be severely impacted as we decarbonize through a process of decommissioning, and then, of course, the global move away, although we know that some, out of dire short-term necessity, have re-invoked coal in their ecosystems, and who knows how long the global market for coal is going to sustain. But we all know that at some point, whether it's 2035, whether it's 2040, that coal is going to basically drop off. And therefore we have, and this is a critical point I want to make, we are able to project the pathway with time over which our transition needs to find answers. It's not a scattergun approach. It's not a one-size-fits-all. It's understanding what these pathways look like and then beginning to tailor our responses accordingly. So it is now common knowledge that we require as rapid a rollout of renewables as is humanly possible. It is now also known as normative fact, I think, that in order to accommodate that crowding in of renewables, we require grid upgrades and grid extensions. And it's also reasonably clear to us that we need to decommission and repurpose, where possible, power stations. When you bring all of these things together, it is not just a case of creating jobs in a vacuum. It's a case of creating jobs with intent, understanding where the opportunities are going to be for those jobs. And then the critical thing is to ensure that as that demand side opportunity or opportunities present themselves, on the supply side, we have the skills readiness to be able to take advantage of these jobs. And I want to talk about a hierarchy, although that's a really bad way of looking at it, all the way from highly skilled through to relatively unskilled. And what we hope is that in the process of losing the jobs in the coal value chain, we create the opportunities which are more decent, better paying, and more sustainable jobs in the green economic future. And how we manage this transition is going to be critical. The ecosystem, we know, is complex. We know that there have been failures, and I will be straightforward and open, where for a long period of time we lost sight as a country of what our key imperatives were, but we're clawing our way back, and we must use this renewed opportunity to ensure that the entire system, all the way from the CSI programs, the training levies that are levied through industry, through the CETAs, through the TVET colleges, are all fit for purpose with respect to understanding the signals that are coming from our transitional journey and from the ground. There is a lot of work being done already to systematically, for want of a better word, take stock of the type of skills that we need. So we need to move from policy and strategy to a clear enunciation of occupational class needs across the value chain and across time. Today, for example, the 3 wind renewable energy projects are being financially closed and signed off. The 2 that remain unfortunately locked in on the issue of local content. Now, local content is not something that is unrelated to all of this. There has been the story of local content requirement being acknowledged and responded to through the REAP program, but it is absolutely imperative that if we want that investment to take place, and we want a clear chain of skills development as part of that investment, we have to create certainty with respect to a long-range program that is committed and a long-range set of opportunities that in fact crowd in the willingness on the part of international and local players to make the investments now, capital investments, in ensuring that the capacity to become an integral part of value chains and supply chains is created today. So this is a total system change that we're talking about, and I think through this system, while there's very complex as well as detailed work that needs to be done, I'm going to come back to the first few steps that are required for any long-range journey. And I think the C4PDP program is a very interesting and valuable first step. And I'm hoping that through the course of this learning, we find the proper articulation in what we all glibly call PPP. You know, public-private partnerships are nothing theoretical. They are forged on the ground, they are forged in practice, and they are forged with purpose, and they are practical and implementable. So what we're looking forward to as the PCC, and we will do work here and partner with partners, is to understand, as we undertake this transition, what are the timeframes, what are the industrial sectors, what do the value chains look like, what occupational class requirements do they throw out, and are our TVET colleges oriented towards meeting that demand side set of conditions that are absolutely imperative if we are not to have a constraint on our socioeconomic journey as we create these jobs. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Deepak. Sure, those were all very powerful opening statements, and for me, very thought-provoking. I wonder what's going through your mind. So I just want to remind you to pull out your phone and get onto Mentimeter and log those comments or those questions, and I'll jump onto it. We do have the code on the screen for those who didn't catch it earlier. Log on to www.mentimeter.com and then put in that code and pose your question or your comments. And I am going to jump right into those after this question. Something that stood out in all the 3 opening remarks was there's definitely a lot of innovative thinking that is required, thinking differently and thinking at a different level to come up with the solutions that are required. Coupled with that, I think there is also then the level of innovation that is required in our young people for them to move forward. Just picking up on what you said, Ms. Fumani, that entrepreneurship is about creating new value in new markets, and I really like the way you phrased it. So I'd like to just throw out a question to all 3 of you and ask you to weigh in on it in terms of what are some of the practical steps that we can take to foster and cultivate a culture of innovation in our young people as we are transitioning. And this is across the board, whether it is through the skills development component or through entrepreneurship and starting new businesses. How do we do that practically? Because we know right now it is a gap. There's a big chasm in terms of just that innovative thinking and innovative implementation. So I'd like all three of you to please weigh in on that.
Good. Okay, so I'll give an example, a practical example of work that we're doing in a community called Ganana in Bronkhorstspruit. And it's not a known community because the community is the product of the agriculture sector there, and families having sort of grown out of that. And it's a community of 3,000 people and completely off the grid. It wasn't planned for. And we were appointed by a biogas plant that's situated in that area to, train young people. So one of the things that we've embarked upon, which we're doing there and in other parts of the country, is creating community colleges. And that's to the question of PPPs. They're not an abstract thing. Years ago, we were applied for CETA accreditation with the Energy and Water CETA so that we could deliver skills training in the communities that we work in, because by definition, if you've seen a wind farm anywhere in South Africa, you've seen it in a place that's quite remote. By definition, a lot of our projects are in very remote areas. And in this context, there's an amazing bio-to energy plant that is in Bronkhorstspruit, and it's hosted by this community of 3,000 people. So when you talk about innovation, we're running a renewable energy training program, and a lot of the content, in fact, comes from the GIZ. Again, showing that the integrations in the economy are there, and they're very practical to implement. So we've got the Energy CETA accrediting the training, content coming from the GIZ. So we're training young people on renewable energy skills, technical training. The beauty of there being nothing, in a sense, where they are located, is that the innovation and the end outcome of the program is that they're going to create solar systems to power their households. So basic solar systems that can power, let's say, charging us, phones in the household, a television, etc. Light currency, and they're excited by that because they're solving for a problem that they understand best. And innovation, I think, is a big word, but it seldom looks like going to the moon. There's a lot that you can do in day-to-day life, using technologies that are already available, but using them and applying them in an innovative way to take a community that can't possibly be connected to the national grid, but provide power. And it's the young people of that community who are going to do it for themselves on the basis of the skill. So, in my experience, there's a lot that can be done. And one of the things that I think is of importance, again, in thinking about the history of our country, is rethinking geography. Because a lot of what is innovative also needs to happen in spaces that are not here. It's not in Sandton. It's in the communities that exist, that people call home, that are small and have the potential to develop into, substantial towns and cities. And there exists a lot of potential for innovation, but it requires us to have a broader perspective, to be willing to take risks, to be willing to work in places that aren't air-conditioned, but appreciating that in making that small investment in that innovation, we transform those communities into communities of the future.
So from my perspective, actually, I got an aha moment last week when we had, I hosted a CEO roundtable with big company CEOs, about 20 of them. And we had Minister of Justice and Correctional Services, Minister Ronald Lamula, as a keynote speaker. And at the end of that roundtable, he said, you know what, this has been very insightful for me, because one of the action I'm taking is to say, how do we ensure that the policies and the regulations that we have are actually enabling and encouraging innovators? Because he said in many ways they actually inhibit innovation because they haven't kept up, the policies haven't kept up with the technological changes externally. For example, the tech fintech take InsurTech. There's so many things that, innovations that are happening around the world, Silicon Valley, whatever, that you cannot do here because it's not enabled by our laws. So that's number one. I think we need to have the system that is encouraging from a policy point of view. And there's many examples. The second thing is on innovation is to give people access to practical experience and experimentation. Because innovation is not academic. You have to do, touch, feel. In the program I was talking about earlier, the Next Engineers, we had young girls as young as 14 to 18. We took them to a camp with the Faculty of Engineering at Wits, about 200 of them during the holiday. And in a week, and we put them in groups of 10 to work on projects, decarbonization projects, and come up with ideas, supported by GE engineers as well as the faculty. The kind of stuff that they created and produced at the age of 14 to 18 was just mind-blowing. When you enable unrestricted thinking, but also give them access to resources. So, the point is that people do not have access to the practical side of work. So I think the challenge to all of us in big companies is to allow these youngsters to come to our facilities. Just taking them to see a plane engine in a hangar was so eye-opening. I know BMW, talking about the German government, have donated an engine, a car engine, to one of the schools in Soshanguve.
Yeah.
And the output on STEM in that school has been amazing because you're working on something you can see, not just sit there and imagine how an engine looks like. And many people have not seen because they don't even have a car in their homes, right? So I think as big businesses, we can create more and more opportunities because people need to be inspired, they need to feel, they need to touch. And when you look at it, you can see the friction and see how you can improve it. The last point for me is our attitude to failure. Because the reality about innovation is that so many things you try will fail, right? And that's the thing with entrepreneurship. We all know about the 1 in 100 enterprises that succeeds. But to get those, we all want the unicorns. To get those unicorns, you've had 100 failures versus the one that succeed. And you need that patience because maybe in that one that succeed and create so many jobs like Facebook did, it offset what you've lost in the 99 that failed. But the fact is, a lot of big ideas were born out of previous failures. And if we laugh and frown on failure, then we discourage risk-taking. And in innovation, there's risk. Because you will invest, but you may not get your return now, and you need to keep at it. And I think we really need to be more patient to encourage innovation.
Thank you. I'm going to take a slight counterpoint view here. I think the way in which the millennial understanding of entrepreneurship has evolved might not find, let's just call it appropriate or relevant foundations and fertile ground in our context. I would prefer to talk about enterprise development because the minute you say entrepreneurialism, it conjures up images of startups, high tech, et cetera, et cetera. And I think we must rid our ecosystem of this notion that we are going to become the Silicon Valley of tomorrow. Sure, there might be hubs in South Africa which lend themselves to that. I would much rather talk about enterprise development, as old-fashioned and 21st century as that might sound. Okay, or early 21st century as that might sound. Because it's in these value chains that we need to create the opportunities where fertile ground is created for people who have business acumen. I'm using old-fashioned words now. To find a place where they can give expression to their desire to be enterprising. The second point I wanted to make, and as the PCC we are very keen to look at this concept of social and decentralized ownership as we go about this just transition that we talk about. And I'm going to use 2 examples to illustrate what I am saying. One is not related really well, it is actually. So I looked at, because a friend of mine runs the Enterprise Development Fund, and the other night over dinner, he put this prospectus in front of me, and it was pulled together on pieces of paper with original color photographs, by the way, and it showed 5 young, enterprising individuals who found a way of taking these inflatable type of swimming pools that you have, go to the manufacturer and create an inflatable bag into which they threw cow poo. And as the cow poo did what it does and generated methane, they found a creative way of piping that methane to a compressor, and that compressor then, through a filter, etc., putting it into cylinders. It's a pilot project. Requires what? It requires financing to scale up. It requires linkages to the formal sector that allow it to thrive. They don't yet have off-takers, but they do have 6 cylinders that they rotate through the community providing gas for heating and cooking. Simple. I don't know whether you call that entrepreneurialism. I don't know whether you call that appropriate innovation, but here are 5 young people who have latched onto an idea that requires funding, that requires linkages into the formal sector and scaling up. Another example, and this is a pilot project run with assistance from UCT, is going into a community, mobilizing that community, creating a co-op in that community, and finding a piece of land in the middle of that community where a solar array can be put up, with a view to generating initially for energy security for that community, with the prospect of generating surplus, if only now we got our, I was going to say, cow something sorted out, find a way of wheeling that onto the local grid for some income generation for the community. Who's the entrepreneur? Who's the creative thinker? Who brings these things together to create the opportunities? For the first time, through this co-op, there's a potential, and it's all women, by the way, who've been invited to own a solar panel, which is now being resourced through a grant from the university, but whose payback will reach a point in 2 or 3 years' time where there's not much, but nonetheless a little stream of what I would call diversified revenue coming into that household. These are just creative ways in which, without fanfare, without solving Eskom's load shedding problems, we can find a way of locating people, enterprise development, jobs, and in fact, ownership of pieces of assets that make up the entirety of our system. And I think we mustn't only find the big sort of aha moments, but we must look for the opportunities that present themselves as we go along. And that requires a fundamental mind shift, mindset change, where we look for the opportunity that makes a difference to ordinary people's lives, people who don't have hope of formal jobs, people who probably don't know where their next disposable rand is going to come from, but who I think can become part of, benefit from, and own the process that we call the just transition. Without it, we can forget about the social cohesion that we need to enable the big stuff to happen.
Very insightful, very, very insightful. I'd like to have a look at some of your comments and questions that you've posted on Mentimeter. Can we view the results, please? So we got 28 questions, is it? Wow. So I'm not sure if we'll get through all 28, but let's see how far we go. We have the first one, and there's a number of thumbs up for that one. So it says, what can all partners do in South Africa to fully understand which development projects happen, where, and with what deliverables? A lot is happening, yet no dashboard is available. That is such it's a thought I was having as you were talking, Deepak, about, identifying and finding those small organic opportunities, even if we can call it. Has there been thought about how this gets all pulled into a dashboard and there's visibility?
So we do not have a dashboard, But what we are trying to do is create something that we call a just transition financing mechanism, which, while it appears highfalutin and at the national level seeks to find the capital that is required, that capital blended can be used in high impact, perhaps lower returning projects which need to be identified. My intuitive answer to this question is that we're going to have to crowd in these opportunities in the spaces where people are impacted and therefore where the opportunities are greatest. And here I think everyone understands the importance of using the decommissioning of power stations as that happens in the Mpumalanga area to ensure that that is not only seen as a decommissioning and demolition project, but in fact an ecosystem impact that can begin to crowd in opportunities with respect to new livelihoods. Areas that are aligned to the just transition, and here I'm speaking off the cuff, would be, for example, land rehabilitation and land use projects in Mpumalanga where the coal fields are. So rehabilitation as well as opportunities to utilize that land as productive assets, create opportunities for communities to benefit. The decommissioning of power stations and the crowding in, hopefully in those localities of renewable projects, create the opportunities for perhaps embedded, decentralized ownership over some of those renewable opportunities. In places like Quebec, I think we're going to have to become much more creative as, I did not mention this, by the way. In terms of our motor manufacturing sector, we've spent decades building up the motor industry in South Africa. And a piece of statistic, 60% of that which is manufactured, right-hand drive, internal combustion engine vehicles, are for the export market, of which 60% go to Europe. And Europe, through its EU Parliament, has now formally taken a resolution in June to ban the sale of new ICE, internal combustion engine vehicles, from 2035. It means that there are areas of the country where absolutely critical manufacturing jobs and supply chains get their livelihoods from will potentially disappear or be dealt a severe blow. And so if we want to find a way of restructuring those supply chains, then I think transitional and just energy projects that assist, in the case of Quebec, for example, Eastern Cape, Roslyn, Durban South, to find a way of resourcing and creating the opportunities for SMMEs to transform, transition, get new skills to be able to service a new type of industry in the future. So I'm not sure if I'm answering that question directly, but I think we need to find alignment between the imperative for just transition as well as the opportunities that arise from it.
If I may add, I think this is absolutely critical, right, to have the visibility and the dashboard. Because what we lack sometimes is the continuity from large-scale projects, infrastructure project, when it ends, to say where does that skill go to? And if you have visibility to say, as this one ends, another one starts, and so on and so forth, we'll have a better chance of retaining skill. Because the challenge we have, like I said earlier, is that everybody in the world is building renewable infrastructure. So if people cannot find jobs here that we have trained, they go offshore. And we've already lost many. So that visibility to say you can move from project A to B to C, and it doesn't always have to be in the renewable or engineering, because some of these are transferable. I mean, what happened to all of the skill that built 2010 stadiums? You know, and Andre will tell you that from ESCOM, that ESCOM engineers are all over the world, but we have load shedding here because they left. So we will be competing globally for talent, and retention has got to be part of this thinking.
Yeah. No, certainly. And this, I think perhaps, if I may say, I think the need for that dashboard is perhaps a conversation that we do need to take forward even outside of this in identifying who the right holder of it would be or owner of it would be within the ecosystem and how it gets put together, because it will fundamentally also make it so much easier from a skills development perspective and futuristic planning in terms of, particularly with the TVET colleges, in terms of being able to identify even short skills that then the industry will definitely be needing and absorbing in the future. So thank you for that question, and a lot of thumbs up are going up. Can we have the next one, please? To Mr. Mabunda, this is yours. We are sitting with unemployed mechanical and civil engineers not employed. What do you mean there is not enough engineers?
Well,
Over
where
to
are they? Because not just us, but many companies, it's a fact that they are in the electrical space importing engineers. So maybe there needs to be repurposed. Maybe we need to make sure that we bridge the gap between academic qualification and practical skills to do the work. Andre is on record saying that on average, the power stations in South Africa have been run by people who have 18 months experience. Fact. He said that. And they've now gone out and asked for retired engineers to come back to help with load shedding on the electrical side. So I think one of the things that we need to look at, we are engaging with universities, is to say that how do we support universities to create work-ready graduates? And I think the TVET, it's also useful in that regard, because we have a lot of people with academic qualification but don't have the practical skills to do the work. There are initiatives that we all support, like the YES program, that helps with internship and so on and so forth. But the fact is that 70% of what you know or your training is on the job, not outside of work. It's really by doing, and we need to encourage that. So for me, that's the challenge. People with paper qualification, maybe not enough experience, and so on. And we are challenging. I'm very involved in that. We are challenging the universities to evolve and shape up in terms of how they train.
Yeah.
Maybe, so what I'd like to add to this, and it's certainly not a response that, I don't know if there are not enough engineers, but one of the things that I think is a challenge, again, thinking about the black majority, what it means for a young black person to exit university, is the natural risk aversion that exists within the black community, right? So if your family is invested in you to get to that point, what are the chances that you're going to join a Billy, a 13-year-old entity versus Eskom? It represents security, it comes with a great package, blah, 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 but it's actually not necessarily the future. And that's not to say Eskom as a utility is dying, but certainly the core business is not renewable energy. And so one of the things that becomes challenging around, and certainly we've experienced it, is that the risk aversion that exists in our community means that very often it's privileged people who go into sectors of the future. And the people that we want to bring along are very hard to bring along. So I think that there's also work to be done around how we create security in sectors of the future so that young black people can participate in those sectors rather than having to always take what is the safer position, which is to work for the existing monopolies, many of which are not really representative of the future that we're trying to build.
Yeah, I think just to add to that, one of the key things, and what I like about this program that has got a very difficult acronym, is the focus on the township. Because if you go back to innovation, when you innovate, you have to overcome a friction in the current ecosystem, in the current design, in the current life. And a lot of those friction are happening where the majority of the consumers are at. Those are the problems we need to solve. So if you are really living, schooled, and working in Sandhurst, I'm not sure you would have all of the right insights to truly understand the daily frictions that happens for someone living in a shack in Khayelitsha. Then those innovators need to come from those communities because they know what the issues are. And the township economy, part of it, even beyond just black, becomes very important because that's where you will get a bigger mess for solving these issues. You know, and there's a lot of things that are unresolved. I mean, today, even the renewable space, or EV, you were talking about electric vehicles, there is so much that we still don't know. We're sitting with the CEO of BlackRock the other time, and he was addressing us as leaders of GE, and he said, unfortunately, the solutions to the challenges that we still need to overcome in renewable energy landscape and EV are not going to come from you as GE. It will come from small businesses. It will come from innovators who can think differently about these things. So we need to take it at source. But the range for EVs is still very low, right? The battery backup for solar and whatever, it's still not good enough. That is why you still need a base load with gas. And that is why you still need a base load, or some people are going back into coal, to your earlier point, because, you know, what happens when the wind is not blowing and the sun is not shining? That question is not yet sufficiently answered in terms of the technology on batteries. Someone needs to answer that. That's where the innovators come in. And they could come from South Africa.
So, Mr. Mabunda, I want to go back to that question. I've got a feeling it probably came from one of our TVET College colleagues, because it is a serious challenge where, and I'm looking at your answer in that you're saying it's probably also because of practical work experience. And I think the TVET colleges that are here would attest to that. They're actually exploring various different mechanisms and ways to try and introduce young people to this practical experience. And one of the things that we've been piloting in the previous program, as you've heard earlier, has been the IRM initiative, which is through just identifying or breaking down some of the bigger qualifications into smaller components that create pathways for that career development, so that there's quicker access into the work environment, and a lot of the working then happens on that job. So in piloting that is now also then saying, introducing those skills into the SME sector, because in the past, we've seen that the big business can only take in so much. They can only absorb so much. Yet there's this whole SME space that we would like, by 2030, I think we want 9.9 million jobs to come from SMEs. And today we're talking, 28% are only coming from SMEs. And some of the things that come up or some of the challenges is access to market. So, and I'm just throwing it out there. So we have this chain, right? In order to give these young people opportunity to workplace experience through an SME, the SME currently does not have enough jobs or enough work on a sustainable, consistent basis to keep this young person in training. So we have a scenario of 1 month, 2 month, that type of a setup, especially in contractual arrangements. So the question is, just from a business perspective and the conversations that you probably are having with some of your colleagues, to share some insights on what are some of the practical things that business can do to transform or unbundle their supply chain. I mean, just as much as businesses are off-takers, they are also the owners of the value chains. So how do we create more opportunities, more access opportunities, particularly for township SMEs?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think enterprise development and preferential procurement as part of the BEE Charter actually does work. I've seen that because you've got a certain quota that you have to buy from SMEs, obviously for small businesses, black businesses, women-owned enterprises, and you get rewarded for that from a BEE point of view. So that's kind of number one, and I think we need to be stricter with that to make sure. I mean, as GE, I'm pleased to say we are BBBE level 1, but we were not 3 years ago. right? And part of what got us there is investment in the SMEs value chain and enterprise development. Now, so that's the first thing that we need to enforce the enterprise development. We need to go and look into, frankly, a lot of bad behavior that happens in that space where there is fronting, there is playing the system, and so on and so forth. But I think the intent, if done well, it works. That's number one. The second thing that I've seen work, and before I joined GE, I was CEO of a brewery. And it's organizing the SMEs into a bigger ecosystem. Because, I give you an example, and this comes up a lot with the cleaning companies, where people say, well, it's easy to give all of my facilities to Bidvest to manage, or, they're big, they can do gardening, they can clean, they can do, and you deal with one company. But, what we started to do in the brewery space was to create these hubs where these smaller farmers can go and then take their plow, and then there's a system that actually manages that, so that you just deal with one big supplier. But that big supplier is the one that is dealing with the smaller farmers and then training them. And that was also quite useful, because then we had them in one space where we could train them on product quality. Because one of the biggest complaints around working with SMEs for many of the big businesses is inconsistent quality, and not so reliable in being professional in terms of the delivery. And if you can organize them into hubs and then you create that skill transfer, then that's helpful. But you need to be patient with it and give access. And then, because the last thing, and we're having this conversation even last week, is the disadvantage that SMEs have when it comes to pricing because of lack of scale. Because economies of scale give better pricing. How do you bridge that in an environment today where the top line is not growing? Because our GDP is barely growing 2%. So you're not growing the top line. You're trying to lower the costs. And the SMEs complain that they're being squeezed and squeezed and squeezed. So how do they become more competitive without scale? And I think this is where some of the development entities can help in training the SMEs to really be more and more efficient. Because in theory, they should have less overheads. They should have more flexibility to some of these bigger companies, and then bring a competitive advantage. But you look at any report, integrated report, and the analyst comments, big companies are under pressure to improve margin. And you do that by reducing your cost. And SMEs, like for likes, tend to be more expensive than the big companies. And then you end up spinning. So that is a real constraint.
Sure, it's really a balance of forces, because they are always very competing forces.
Yeah.
I'm looking at time, and we probably have another 7 minutes, so let's grab another question. Supporting career paths in the artisanal space is important, but to ensure success, you need to create access to market opportunities. So that's the conversation we've just been having now, yeah? I don't know if anyone would like to weigh in a bit more, or can we move to the next one?
Can I just say something here, one thing quickly on the access to market? I think government needs to also come in and think about how do we create scale. So in terms of offtake, so I'll give you an example. I mean, it's no secret. Wind is huge, it's going to be big. We've been looking at possibility of setting up a wind manufacturing facility, because it's just not competitive to have to import from Europe with the rand and all of that, and the fact that we are at capacity, right? But then you look at it and say, okay, but as one company, and all the projects that are out there, maybe you win a third of them. To run a wind facility, you need to produce, say, for it to be feasible, say, 1,200 turbines a year. And your demand and what you can win, it's 800. But the total market is 1,500, right? For it to be feasible, you need, say, 1,200. So none of the winners have got enough volume to build a facility. Therefore, you all import. But as a market, all of you if the market demand is 1,500 and you need 1,200, together, if you're to consolidate, you can have enough demand.
So it's
But
a
then
hard
that goes,
example, eh?
that goes beyond a GE or a Siemens or an EDF. This is the place where maybe through Department of Trade and IDC and the funders say, we're going to put up the facility and all of you buy from us. Because not all of these components are unique. And even if they were, you could be running GE Monday to Tuesday, and you run someone else, and then run someone else, and someone else. You create the jobs. But because none of us can put up the facility, we end up walking away. Because there's a certain minimum volumes you need to invest in manufacturing. And earlier on, we talked about the example of the auto industry. The auto industry got it right because the numbers are even higher than you said. Of the BMWs that are being built in Roslyn, X3, only 10% is sold in South Africa. And of the Mercedes in Eastern Cape, only 15% is sold in South Africa. The rest is exported because you have the market. You know, so South Africa, in many cases, is not big enough to justify the investment in a plant. And that is why even with the black industrialist programs, those plants, 50 million rands, down the drain, because you build them, there's not enough offtake, you close them. Mara is a good example. Fundamentally, for job creation and for market access, we need to consolidate because we are not big enough. And how do we then look into something like Africa Continental Free Trade Zone, also as an offtake? But that is a government intervention rather than companies trying to do it all on their own.
Great insight there. Looking at the next question, what do you do with TVET students in need of industry exposure not covered by workmen's or COIDA insurance for their college? What do we do with TVET students in need of industry exposure not covered by workmen or COIDA insurance? I'm not sure if any of the panelists can take that question. Is there anyone on the floor who would like to take that question? I guess the issue is that obviously there could be opportunities for them to get the experience, but because they cannot be covered by workmen's and COIDA, there's a gap. Can we have a mic for Mr. Mani, please?
Thank you. Thank you, Abigail. I actually answered this one on the group as well. That statement is actually not true. The funding that colleges get to pay stipends for students to go to industry, that includes the COIDA. Each TVET college actually has got a separate COIDA number for students placed in industry. We just had at Ekurhuleni West TVET College a student that got hurt. All his operations, everything is being covered by that COIDA. So yes, that is a misconception. The people that's placed in industry is covered. Thank you.
Thank you, Mani. You've answered that on our behalf. Okay, I'm told we may not have, I'm going to squeeze in one last question, okay? I've been told it's time up. So I'm going to squeeze in one last question. And by the way, those questions that you've put up will not go to waste. We will certainly reflect on them. And perhaps they could become nice thematic for future sessions that we'll have. So do our private sector panelists see an opportunity to engage with this program, and how?
So I can tell you, I mean, already the example that was given about the repairs and maintenance in Baragwanath Hospital, I'd like to follow up on that because we are one of the biggest manufacturers of hospital equipment. Pretty much about 50% of what you need to run a hospital, we make. And we're short of maintenance people, you know. So there's already a pipeline of people who, and Baragwanath is one of our customers, and maybe they did repair some of our equipment. But that's great. We like to access those and see if perhaps that program is expanded, we can give opportunities for some of the participants and future participants to come to work with our engineers to go and observe them as they go to Potchefstroom, they go to Polokwane, Giyani, and they are servicing equipment all over the country to go and understudy. So there's that opportunity, because back to practical, you know. So for me, I see opportunities that way from a pipeline point of view and work experience and partnering for training. So the opportunities are many. That's why we're here. You know, we can't do it alone.
Sure. I mean, I'd add the same in saying that there's ample opportunity. It's clear to us. You know, one of the things that we emphasize outside of, you know, thinking about utility scale power plants is also, you know, deploying renewable energy infrastructure to points of social service access. So schools, clinics, you know, taking them off the grid, etc. And one of the challenges that we find in doing that work is that the installation part is sometimes the easier part. The thing that gives us a headache is what happens when the installation is done, which is this maintenance component. You need local people. You know, you can't send someone from Johannesburg to go and maintain, you know, a school's, like, you know, 20 kilowatt system in Mokopane, let's say. And that for me is a huge opportunity. And again, you know, I just want to tie it back to the question of geography. We really need to rethink South Africa's economy in a far more decentralized way. The opportunity that we have, you know, one in the renewable energy sector, but across the sectors, health, agri, all these sectors that demonstrate what's possible in the future when you really employ technology. You know, thinking about biotech, there's a lot that we haven't even spoken about that sits outside of the sort of pure energy space, but has to do with the future of the economy. All of that needs to be thought about in decentralized terms. You know, successful economies are not built in 2 or 3 cities. And it's important for us to appreciate that we have the opportunity to create multiple cities in South Africa, but it starts with locating skills in those communities to deal with the problems of those communities. So I think there's ample opportunity, and absolutely, we'd love to engage with the program directly. And it is about, you know, the program, I think, attaching itself to industry and appreciating that, you know, industry is broad. You know, you have the, you know, sort of bigger enterprises, and then you have enterprises like ourselves that are absolutely vying to be, you know, big players in the economy. And I think it's important to see both layers in order to see the fullness of the opportunity that exists.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'd like you to give a round of applause to the panelists and to yourselves. Thank you. I'm going to Love and leave you. I think you don't have seats, so you're probably going to have to stay here. And I think that was such a beautiful question to close off, because literally as NBI, you know, we really exist to foster collective action and collaboration, and that's really what we love to see, and that's really what we love to do. So that was an awesome question to close off with. I'd love to call on stage for our vote of thanks and closing remarks Ms. Francisca Spori as the Head of Economic Cooperation and Development, the SECO, and Mr. Thomas Sief, the Country Director for GIZ. Please come up to give us our closing remarks. Thank you.
Ladies first, he said. So you see, we do a bit improvising, just also to make it a bit less of a specific speech, and we just want to conclude how our colleagues Gisela and Kirsten have started to also illustrate partnership. And you don't, I mean, we know it's always difficult, even in Europe, but I think sometimes we are closer abroad than in the European context, where we have also many concrete challenges. Let me start this concluding session with a quote that I have used many times, but I really think it is very suitable here. And it's from Henry Ford. And he says, "Coming together is a beginning, keeping together is progress, working together is success." And I think it summarized very nicely what we have discussed and what you have mentioned. You brought in the need of ecosystem that brings people together. You mentioned the importance, for instance, of maintenance, which means we have to stick together, keep together. And you mentioned the PPP spectrum. That means the partnership, right? The public-private partnership. And just, I noted some interesting remarks from the panel, like from Mr. Mabunda, innovation is not academic, innovation is practical. I think that is very important for our project, and this is also how you can approach us. Then also, Ms. Tembi said, skills need a home. I very much like this, because it also puts the SMMEs in the center. And then what Mr. Patel said about the public-private partnership, what I like, and I think it should be also a theme for this partnership, that we need to be, that's nothing theoretical. It's targeted, practical, and implementable. And I think this is what also we as partners want to demonstrate. And I think with that, I hand over to Thomas.
Franziska, thank you very much. Yeah, no more quotes from my side. But I also took one remark for the very ambitious program that we have in front of us. And after the panel, I don't think it's less ambitious now. I think it sounds even more ambitious. But Mr. Patel, what you said, I think, is about the existing policies, the existing strategies, and also the existing capacities. And I think the role we would like to play with the project is to create that linkages, or to support creating those linkages. Bring the expertise wherever necessary. You mentioned that there was some technical expertise in a very specific sector where we can bring that in. We will bring that in, but I think the big advantage and the challenge for the program is creating that linkages. And I would just like to thank DHET, Department of Higher Education and Training, to engage in that program, to start the program, and to work with all the partners, Germany, Switzerland, NBI, all of you that are here in the room, in that program that lies ahead of us. So from my side, since we now have the lunch in front of us, and what better opportunity to discuss even further the other 35 questions. Let us go to lunch, and thank you very much for the opportunity and to work together in the future. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sure, ladies and gentlemen, we have come to the end of our program. I must tell you a little secret. The event organizers were so concerned that we've just planned way too much time. But based on how it went, I think the time was too little. Do you agree with me? There's so much to talk about. So it is now time for networking and a light lunch. Those 2 doors will be opened and lunch will be served through those doors. There are 2 serving stations to the left and to the right. And there is also a bar for drinks that side together with this side. So you can use both stations for the drinks. And just 2 last announcements. If you have not signed the register, please do remember to do so before you leave. And those of you who parked in the basement would need a parking ticket and haven't received one. You need to bring one to Kathy, who's sitting right here. Kathy, wave, a big smile. This is Kathy. So if you haven't exchanged your parking ticket, please bring it to Kathy. She will give you a paid-up ticket to enable you to exit the parking. Enjoy the lunch, enjoy the networking, and thank you very much for your presence today.